I love success stories. I particularly like hearing from our customers when they've found a solution to a problem that's been nagging them and turns out to be some sort of a simple fix. I call these little miracles on Mercedes-Benz. Sometimes they even happen here in our own shop, and recently it happened to my 300 SDL. I was having this intermittent shutdown problem, and every once in a while the engine would just not shut off. Then I'd go to start it and it would shut off fine. Sometimes I would test it, I'd find nothing wrong with it. I even hooked up a vacuum gauge to the line and found that the vacuum pump was putting out. So let me tell you what I did. I think you'll find this quite amazing. In keeping with my philosophy to check the simple things first, I went and tested the shutoff valve here with the vacuum hand pump. Disconnected the line, pumped it up, and the engine shut off just fine. So it became obvious there was nothing wrong with the valve, but there's some sort of problem with the vacuum. So I began to look at all these vacuum lines, and there's quite a few of them here on this 300 SDL. If you come across here, you can see quite a number here, and then you follow around over there, and you can see there's a number of other vacuum lines underneath the air filter over there. I decided, why not just go ahead and replace all the vacuum lines? And there's quite a few of them. Take a look here. These are all the old fittings and hoses that I removed from this 300 SDL. Once I got into this, I found some pretty nasty hoses. You have to remember, these are probably 25 years old. And it's not that if you look at them visually, they kind of look okay. But as I pull them off, you begin to realize that this inside diameter has swollen over the years, expanded, and it's lost its tight seal. You can look here and see the difference between the inside diameter of the new hose and the inside diameter of the old hose. It's quite a difference, isn't it? What I did was I went one step at a time. I took one hose or one fitting off at a time, got the new hose, cut to length, and then reinstalled it. And then I went on to the next hose and fitting. You don't want to pull everything off at once or you'll forget what went where, and then you're going to really have a problem. One trick that I've learned is sometimes it's very hard to get these hoses off. They're stuck on the plastic line or the fitting, and if you try to pull on them, they're going to tighten up and make it even more difficult to get off. But using this hook tool, you can get in on the back side here and you can pull on the hose and get it off the fitting quite easily. So after about an hour of cutting, fitting, and you can see there's a lot of these elbows that had to be replaced, I put everything back together and we tested the car. Well, we rolled the car out of the shop, started it up, I let it run for a few seconds and turned the key and it shut off immediately. And you can imagine how happy I was. I'm sure if you've fixed some of your own problems, you know the excitement of having solved the issue and you're back on the road again. In a future video, I'm going to go through the entire process using vacuum hand pump tester and a vacuum gauge and show how we test all these systems in this engine, including the results of what I found and the two key hoses that were actually causing this problem. And you know, miracles just sometimes come in pairs, sometimes come in threes, but shortly after I fixed this car, my wife reported that her 1993 300D was starting to have some problems. She was complaining about a hard brake, she was complaining about abrupt shifting, and when I got the car to the shop, sure enough, it didn't shut off right away. There was a slight hesitation. So guess what I did? Rather than spend a lot of time testing all the systems in that car, I said, hey, let's get the hose and replace all the hoses. So in this 300D 2.5, which had quite a few more hoses than this 300 SDL, we changed everything, and guess what? All those problems were solved. So at that time, I was really happy. So we're sitting there talking about this. As you know, my mechanic said, hey, Ken, I think some of our customers might want to have these kits. And so I've put together a couple of kits for these two cars that will help you replace your own vacuum hoses. On my left here is the kit for the 300 SDL, and on my right, the kit for the 300D 2.5. You can see that as the cars got newer, they seem to add more and more vacuum hoses. If you've had an old 300D or 240D, you say, well, gee, there's only like 5 fittings and 3 hoses. But not so on these newer 6.0X engines. I need to point out that neither of these kits includes every single piece of hose and fitting you will need. Some of the fittings are kind of expensive, especially this small kind of short Y fitting which shows up on these cars. I'm going to include just one in the kits, and then I'll have a link to where you can buy extra ones. But I have included 3 different sizes of vacuum hose, a piece of hard line, as well as the most common fittings which I found were old and rotten. One of the things you'll have to remember is anytime the hose or the fitting is closer to the engine, it's much more likely that you'll find it deteriorated. It's that extra heat which tends to make the plastic hardline brittle, and it tends to make the rubber hose swell and get loose. So if you find, pay particular attention to any of those fittings that have the heat or are really close to the engine. You can go to my website, check out these kits. I'm including the special tool, hook tool that I mentioned earlier in the video, and I will have instruction sheets which will give you some of the tips on how to install these kits in each one of these vehicles.